where Datadog just started going nuts, and it was like ding, 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 and like, oh, AWS is down. So the easiest one to explain is reproducibility, right? This is a red flag, by the way. Not a great thing. This is actually the worst thing that I.
In this video, I'll be talking to Michael Cole, board game enthusiast, dog owner, and troubleshooting expert. We will be discussing what type of personalities excel in software development, answering a question from a Reddit user, and break down his 5 critical steps for troubleshooting any problem.
Make sure to like, subscribe, and enjoy the interview. All right, so one thing I want people to see on this channel is kind of get to know your story and how you got to where you're at. So I think it'd be a great way to start if you could kind of just walk us through your career, how you got where you're at, and so we could kind of understand the story of Michael.
Yeah. So I'll say the first thing first was I've been working with computers ever since high school. I did things like working for Firedog, which was like the Circuit City equivalent of Geek Squad. Like back, like in my senior year of high school, I was like going to work fixing computers for them. So early on, like I've always done IT. I've always been the neighborhood kid that like everybody calls upon to like fix computers, fix printers, do all that type of stuff. So for a long time I technically did 6 years of college because I went for my associates in information systems, and then I went for my bachelor's in computer science, and the courses didn't match. So I did 6 years, 5.5 of college. So I did IT throughout the entire thing. So I've done things like going to other people's homes and fixing their stuff, working at Firedog, working at like random, like the medical university down here as a IT staff. I also even worked for the College of Charleston, which is where I graduated for computer science, doing IT work, right? So like maintaining servers, maintaining backups, doing disk like literally getting tapes for our backups and putting them into the tape device at the College of Charleston, taking them out, mailing them off. So like I did IT stuff for like 6 years during all this, right?
Very cool.
So
yeah.
That's IT. And then my actual like first software engineering job was an internship at my final year of college, building like Android apps. So that actually funny part, the Android app was for interview preparedness. So like I was getting pretty good about interviewing because I had to do these like fake interviews for the software, for like QAing the software. So that was fun. But then got a full-time job working at a CRM software company for nonprofits. That was like Microsoft Shop. Moved to New York after 2 years, worked at a HFT doing DevOps. So this is all like DevOps stuff after my internship.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that we could talk about what DevOps even means after in a little bit. But I did like infrastructure, DevOps, DevX work in this HFT in New York. I eventually moved into product management for that infrastructure team, for like internal product management, also project management. It was any PM that you can imagine. I probably did it there, including TPM at the end here. And then I moved to a mental health care startup doing more DevOpsy infrastructure type things. And then eventually more finance work for a credit card company. And then now back to like a clearing brokerage type company. So my current title after all that is product manager of infrastructure and developer experience is my current title.
Awesome. That sounds like an amazing journey. And it sounds like just the way you described it, your career has been kind of split into 2 different paths. You know, you said operational and development. For the people listening out there, would you be able to give them maybe some advice on how to decide which direction to pursue, or, the different type of personality that would excel in either direction?
Yeah. So whenever I did like IT work, it was very much like customer service oriented. It was about like helping others, making sure that everything was like running smoothly. So like that was definitely a customer facing role, right? So if you're into customer experience and you're wanting to like hang out with people and like be on the phone and like figure out like why their printer isn't working, or if you want to figure out like even in DevOps, you kind of have that. There's a lot of different kind of like roles inside of that. But for IT operations specifically, it's keep the lights on type work. It's like making sure things are running smoothly, make sure everybody's stuff is like up to date, doing like SOC compliance verification type stuff. So that if you are a people pleaser, IT definitely is the role.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I find engineers, programmers are somewhat different beasts, right? So like I came from an operations heavy background, but I've met lots of different types of programmers. I've met programmers who are very much like mathematic in nature, of like, data science type people who want to like solve those types of problems. People who want to like get down in nitty gritty, like debugging like Linux kernel type stuff like that.
Mhm.
That's I've met a lot of them with my HFT time, right? So people who get like really excited about reading the new C++ standard that just like came out, like that. I've met lots of people like that. Um, and those types of people find difficult problems very exciting. Um, and that's not something necessarily that I like doing. So like programming problems, sure, but like algorithmic problems are not necessarily something that I like, you know, dive into. So I would say if you are a people pleaser, go down IT. If you are like a problem solver, go down like programming, like more hardcore programming. If you like making things pretty, front end engineer. Uh, but for me, I'm going to do like DevOpsy type stuff, which like kind of gives me like a little bit of both. So
Oh, very cool. And that makes a lot of sense. So, and you're talking about engineering on here. Um, One thing you have to do in engineering is you have to be able to learn stuff fairly quickly. I mean, there's always a little bit of research time, but and time to bring yourself up to speed. But like in your experience, you've used Terraform, AWS, Ansible, Python, a lot of other stuff. So, what process do you have that helps you pick up a new piece of technology and learn it quickly? And most importantly, so you can use best practices and maybe even be able to speak about it to other people in your organization.
yeah. So whenever I'm looking for experience, I'm not the type of person who can like read the docs. Like a lot of programming documentation is like dry.
Really,
Uh,
this is the first time I'm hearing this.
I like try to go read like Python read the docs. It tells you like what that function does, but it doesn't tell you really like how to use that function.
Mhm.
Um, I more prefer like other types of so like documentation as in code documentation is usually very dry. You're looking for like a very specific answer, including things like Terraform. You're looking for like how do I implement this specific module? So the way that I learn things is either through like reading different types of books. So reading like the automate the boring stuff for like Python or something like that. Like something that gives me context into like why are we doing this thing instead of just like here's the thing and like go type this into the computer and it gives you an answer. Uh, but for things like Terraform, the way that I learned that was actually like jumping in and being like, I don't understand Terraform. What are it? So good projects, I think Terraform has this. Good projects will have like a concepts page usually in the documentation. And the concepts page will say things like, this is what we mean by Terraform state. And this is what we mean by Terraform apply. And this is what we mean by a module versus a provider versus so that a good tools will give you language to be able to give you answers of like, how do I even ask a question instead of just like giving you like that type in this command and it does this thing. So for Terraform, like one of the first, and then adding on to that, I like jumping in and doing a project. So like when I had to learn Terraform on the job, the first thing I had to do was actually move Terraform state from one namespace to another, like
Mhm.
Terraform, like completely different project in AWS or something. Or well, not going to get into the details here because that would be too long. And then
Yeah,
this would just turn into a Terraform explanation.
and
But
2 hours of Terraform.
it 2 hours later, and then I explained. No, so like what I did is I read the concepts page. I understood kind of like what the language was there. And then I said, okay, cool. How do I move Terraform state? What does it even mean to move Terraform state? Why is Terraform state updated? Like, there's a lot of questions that go into that, but they're like nitty details that, like, for me to go learn it, for me to go learn Terraform, I have to understand these details. And for me to understand what those details even mean, I have to learn the broader scope of it. So I like doing one project in a language or in a platform to be able to like figure out like, okay, well, what do I not know yet? And then ask the right questions to figure the rest of it out.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. Because yeah, anytime you start a new, really, whether it's a type of something, a new cloud, there's so many things you know, but there's even more that you don't know that you don't know. And that's the thing I run into a lot too, where you think you got a handle on it, and the more things you learn, the bigger your scope of knowledge gets. And all of a sudden that border of the scope of knowledge is like, holy crap, all this stuff I have no idea what people are even talking about. So I 100% agree with the idea too. You just got to jump in, because I think a lot of people get some sort of analysis paralysis doing a lot of tutorials or reading a lot of docs. So 100% agree with that. Going along with that, I've asked everybody on this channel so far, and I get a wide variety of answers. Imposter syndrome. Does it strike you at all? Or is it one of those things you go, people are just making it up?
All the time. I have no idea why you're talking to me right now. No, so like it's a constant battle, right? So like if someone says that they don't deal with imposter syndrome, I truly think that they would be lying. Or they have like such a self-worth, like they feel like so good about their own self-worth that like they don't feel imposter syndrome ever, which is I wish I could get that way. But yeah, all the time.
Okay,
Constantly.
good. So it's nice to know that for the people listening out there in the world, that it's perfectly common to feel that way. It's not terrible at all. Yeah, I get that too. So we're not alone.
Go ahead.
Oh, go for it if you had more to add on to that.
Oh no, I was going to respond to the second part of that question.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah. So one of the ways to battle imposter syndrome, right? So I have to, for me personally, again, take this as you will. I always do like the deep breath thing. I make sure that like I am not like just panicking, freaking out, whatever. But then I usually come back to either one of two things, either going back to a project that I know that I'm good at, which is kind of like a bad habit, which means that I'm falling on like, a crutch of like the projects that I already do know. So like, oh, go solve a Terraform problem really quick and then like feel better about yourself, which it's fine, but it means that you're not working on the thing that you felt imposter syndrome before. But the other way that I solved it recently has been writing. I actually keep like a diary kind of notebook thing here. And I write down like things that are going well for me, right? Like every time someone ever says like, oh, like thanks for this or thanks for helping with that, just like make a quick note of it. And then you can like go back and read them at one point. And it's like, yeah, if you have imposter syndrome about like, I don't know why I'm here, I don't know why they don't fire me, that's why they don't fire you, right? Because you have like a big list of like everything that people have ever said like thank you for. So
that is phenomenal idea, because I think a lot of times we get stuck in that right now moment we're in, and we don't realize all the things that we've accomplished, especially over the years. And keeping a notebook like that is an absolutely golden idea. So I hope everyone out there does that, because in fact, I might start doing that after this, because I like that idea.
I used to, I forget the name that I used to call it, but I think it was like love me letter of like, I used to keep it for like, oh, at the end of the year, this is why you should promote me. But now I keep it for like, oh yeah, this is for me. I need to remember all the things that I've done well. And maybe even stuff that I didn't do so well on, so that way I get like improved later. But
perfect. See, that is a good tip for people out there. Another thing I kind of wonder, and I like to ask people about, is work-life balance, because as a developer working in software, DevOps, there's literally infinity stuff to do. You could work 24/7, and there's always more stuff to do. So how do you create that boundary so that when you leave work, maybe you do. I do it a lot, where I start thinking about work and problem solving even at like 9 o'clock at night. But How do you do that so you're able to have work and then not work?
Yeah, so this is actually something that I've only recently really gotten good at. Um, so a few things, a few things that I've tried before, and they kind of work. So I have a dedicated space for work, right? So this is my dedicated space. I have this desk, I have this chair, and then I can like shut my this door and like not come in here on the weekend, right?
Mhm.
So like that's part of it for me is like this is a work only place, and I keep work and home life separate. And the fact that like I try not to eat at my desk. If I'm
Ooh,
going to
that's
eat
good.
lunch, I eat downstairs. If I need to send an email, I come up here to send the email. Right? I don't do it from my phone. I don't work elsewhere. Even though work is a laptop,
Mhm.
it doesn't leave here unless it's absolutely necessary.
Oh, that's
Work is here, everything else is out there.
so that's
Um,
brilliant. So you provide almost like a physical boundary so that you have to physically get in your office area to do work.
but more recently, so like that kind of helped me. A bigger one is my dog, to be
Uh-huh.
perfectly honest. So
Uh,
after work, she'll come in here at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon and start barking at me because I need to go, and I can't say it too loud because otherwise she'll come in here. But the dog park. Uh, if I say those words too loud, she'll like run up here and start barking at me, and it's like too late now to go.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but she'll come up here and drag me out of this room, and then I have a whole hour of just like sitting there decompressing. And my dad used to do this too, actually. We talked about it recently, where he used to come home from work and take a shower. Right? He
Okay.
used to shower before he went to work, but then he would come home and he used to say it a lot, and I never understood it. Where he was like, "Oh, I'm washing off work." Um,
Interesting.
and he's a mechanical engineer, right? So he's like drawing diagrams and stuff all day. Um, or like in the shop and like physically doing infrastructure type stuff, like physical infrastructure, not like AWS. But he would like come home and like shower and like put on comfy clothes, right? So like he physically had he had an office, right? And so like I never understood like, well, that's why just the office I don't think works 100%.
Mhm.
Having a routine that's your turn off switch and even a turn on one, right? So like in the morning I go downstairs, I make coffee, I take my dog out, like I relax out there for 5 minutes before I come up here. That's my morning commute into the office, and then I have an hour commute out of the office by taking her to the DOGPARK.
So when you're at
So
the, let
yeah,
me ask this. When you're at the DOGPARK,
well, you don't have
uh,
to spell it. She
oh,
can't.
okay. She can't hear me, I suppose. That was my funny joke. Do you find yourself still kind of in that hour do you have to decompress? You're spending a lot of time still crunching things and they're kind of percolating in your brain, or is there ability to shut it off, or does it just take that entire hour for stuff to get out of your head so you can move on?
It's that hour is a very bizarre hour. Sometimes I'll be on my phone looking at Slack. Sometimes I'll be on my phone like looking at email. Like I'll be taking notes or whatever.
Mhm.
But then I slowly but surely am like more on Reddit, or like I'll take my headphones and I'll listen to a podcast and like watching and sometimes I'll like put my phone down and watch my dog play with other dogs. And so like there's like a it's not like an on off, right?
Mhm.
It's more of like a decline where I am at work, and then it's kind of declining mentally until the point where by the time I've driven home, like I'm not even thinking about work anymore. Like it, and if something pages me or whatever, then I'll be pulled back into it. But that's also why I have like work snoozes Slack after like 5:30, right?
Mhm.
So like someone has to really want my attention to get me, and I don't check emails. I'm thankfully not on pager duty too often, right? So I don't have to think about it too much. But
So
for the
this is
yeah,
this is kind of the last thing you bring up, an interesting point. So on your phone, do you get your emails forwarded there? Because like one problem I have, because I'm always, you're off doing stuff with your family, you're having fun, but an email comes across at 9 o'clock at night. And you go, well, hold on, let me jump on there real quick and see if I can just look at that because I have both my accounts forwarded to my phone. What do you do for your phone?
I have it where my phone won't notify me about work emails between or after 5:30 at night.
Nice.
So like my phone literally won't do the push notification. It's like I can go and open it. I can go look, but the push notification, I noticed that that's the thing I responded to.
Uh-huh.
So I stopped setting push notifications. So I literally just like disabled my push notification after 5:30, and it turns back on at like 8 o'clock in the morning.
See, that's a brilliant way to go, because I had to do the same thing with my Slack watch, because I would get messages from people putting PRs in at like 8 o'clock at night. And then I go, oh, let me see. So I think I'm going to have to do the same thing with my email. So that's very solid advice, I would say. All right, you ready to try something completely different?
Yeah.
For the first time ever, I was going through Reddit, as I often do, and I found an interesting question on the CS careers questions subreddit. And I thought, you know what, this is kind of the jams of this thing. We both kind of looked over it. We've made some answers. I'll read the question here, and then we can kind of talk to the answers. And hopefully, I won't say their username. It's kind of funny, but it's not appropriate for this. And then hopefully they can get some value out of it. So question is, I've begun applying for entry-level jobs. Which company should I avoid at all costs? After seeing what a scam places like Reventure and Emonix are, I'm not familiar with any of those, I was wondering if anyone has had any other run-ins with predatory entry-level positions. And so I'll let you kind of answer to that, and then I'll give my short bit on it.
Yeah. So I can't say like all the companies that I wouldn't work for, right? I don't know all the companies. So I think we're going to talk like more in generics instead of like very specific company names. But there are definitely a lot of red flags. One of the things that just from a recruiter side that I've seen recently, for some reason it comes through my spam, is the no-name recruiter, or like the recruiter who just copy pastes the job description into your email. And like it's 3 different types of formatting because they've obviously copy pasted from like different places. And they're always like 6 to 14 months, like contract work. Like just steer clear of those people. Like do not respond to those emails. Nothing but trouble down that path. So one of my near and dear to my heart things during an interview is if this is a red flag, by the way, not a great thing. This is actually the worst thing that if I get one of these, I usually like stop the interviewer and say like I've become very prickly in interviews if I feel slighted. If someone is giving me a question that feels like a quiz, like a pop quiz, and like they're looking for like, what is the command to be able to do like Terraform apply? Like what does the Terraform apply command do? And like that one's like more generic. We could talk like at a super high level or whatever. But if they're looking for like this flag does this, or like they're looking for like a trick answer, like something that like I could just go Google, like give me a proper untar the XKCD comic. What's the proper untar command to disarm this bomb? They're either looking for the wrong thing, right? They're either like testing to see whether or not you know the thing, which is fine. Or they just want to feel smart by like they know something that you don't know. And it's like a big red flag. I absolutely hate those types of questions. So like that's red flag number 1. I stopped interviews because of that. Second red flag is if a technical assessment feels like a consulting gig where like they want me to like build a web app that happens to like do like 15 different feature things and they think it'll take me like a week to complete. It's like, are you going to pay me, or like what's up with it? Like technical assessment should be like time boxed to like 1, maybe 2 hours, and like be very vague, like be very specific to what you're going to be doing, or be vague enough that I can show off whatever I want to show off, right? If I want to show off my Terraform, or if I want to show off my like Python, like that's great. But like if you're being very specific, then like make it like an hour long, not like 50 hours long, right? Otherwise, like pay me.
I want to jump on that one too, because I remember one interview I went to a place. They said, okay, well, and I'll just make it pretty generic. They said, we want to hire someone to help migrate these things to a new API. And you go, okay. And they said, okay, so for your next interview, completely unrelated, could you mock up something on how you would migrate these things to an API and then present it to us? You're like, isn't that literally the job? Why am I going to do it in a week? Like, I'm happy to talk through some stuff, but I don't want to make you a full plan for the thing that you might not hire me for. I found that weird.
Yeah. Especially for that one in particular, how would they know that it's a good answer? The interview should be something a good interview. Interviewing is like a hot subject. I love interview type stuff, but like if someone is asking you an interview question, they should know what they did for that thing. It should be an interview question of something that came up in that job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that you have already solved. That way you could see how they would solve it and whether or not you've also thought about that problem. And then that way it's more of a dialogue of like, well, this is what we did. And like, why is your thing better? Or like, it's more of a discussion instead of a like consulting gig.
Well, I mean, if they know the answer, why don't they just do it? Why would they hire somebody for it? So I always found those to be quite odd.
Yeah. So those are my really bad red flags. Like,
Mhm.
would not talk to a company if they do any of those. Good ones, like green flags, I'm just going to like go through these. If they have a training budget in the benefits,
Okay.
shows that the company cares about like leveling up you as an individual. They explicitly post that they want an early career person, right? So we're talking about like early career developers and programmers and stuff. This shows that they might have a better understanding of the fact that they know that you're early career, and that like if you apply for a mid career, right, or like mid or senior role, they're going to be less forgiving. And I think like early career, if someone says like we're hiring early career, they know that they need to train you and they know that you're going to be slower or whatever, because that's just the job. That's just how it works, right? You don't have the experience yet, but we want to build you up. So that would be another green flag. If they have a clear understanding of the interview process, right? So if they tell you how many interviews you're going to be going through and what each interview is for, that proves that they know what they're looking for and why they're looking for it. If someone's like, oh yeah, we're going to have like a few calls or whatever, if you can ask the HR rep or the people person or whoever you're talking to the first time, and they have like a thing that they mail you, like if they mail you a PDF of like, these are the interviews that you will be going through and here's some stuff that you could read beforehand, like that's probably a good place because they've thought a lot about like why they're looking for what they're looking for. And the last like green flag for me is if you have interviewed there and they have non-senior people and non-management people in the interview, like your peers, right? So that way, like, that they care about the viewpoints of your peers and not just of management. So those are my like green flags.
So those are some pretty good ones to go by. And I'll just add a couple onto that. So first of all, this is for an entry-level position. I'm guessing someone maybe either has done an internship or has some skills or just wants their first job. So the first thing I would say is networking. Networking's kind of hard for programmers, so I completely understand that. But that's how I got my first couple roles. Say hi real quick. All right. That's how I got my first couple roles. In fact, every place I've worked at, I've known somebody there first, and that always gave me a little bit of, I guess, a feeling of safety, knowing that if they work there and they're referring me there, that it's hopefully not horrible. And I've been pretty good so far on that. You can read Glassdoor reviews. Again, you have to take those with a grain of salt because some of them could be people that are very upset at the company making those for certain reasons, but generally they're pretty good. Again, entry level, but if they have that chance to take an internship, it's hard to go from non-developer to productive entry-level developer. So if you have a chance to take an internship, it's a great way to build up your resume, and it's a great way to kind of sample the company. Just like they're sampling you for a summer, you get a chance to see if this is the kind of place you want to work at. And lastly, I've known people who've worked at like what you would think of as meh places, but their teams and their managers were awesome. And really, that's what it comes down to, because unless you're interacting with everybody else in the company, like 95% of the time, you're just going to talk to the people that are on your team, your manager, and maybe a couple other people. So the company might kind of not be the best, but if your team around you is awesome, you could end up in a great position. So that's my take. Hopefully for the person on Reddit that posted that, we'll post this in the link, or this link for the video in there, and hopefully it satisfies your answers. So now let's get to what everybody came here for. Michael Cole, expert troubleshooter, debugging master. Let's kind of get into that. So let's see. I've had the honor of working with you for a little bit. You have been one of my favorite people to debug with because I almost think you enjoy it a lot. And so that's what I want to ask on the first thing. Is there's a couple different types of people that when an issue comes up with, there's the kinds that throw up their hands and go, ugh, why do I have to fix this now? I've got my other work. And then there's those other that kind of get a little bit of a twinkle in their eye, almost knowing that the hunt is on and there's something to be discovered. Where do you fall between those two? I know the answer, but I think you should tell everybody the answer.
Yeah. So if it's my own problem, I get annoyed. Uh, that's where like the imposter syndrome comes in of like, why didn't I see that earlier or whatever. So like I hate solving my own problems. Uh, I've and you've heard this, but I've told my manager before that if I could just answer questions on Slack all day, I would be the happiest person in the world. If I could just answer other people's questions and like me not do any work, but like answering and helping literally everybody else's work, perfect job for me. I just want to help other people. So if it's someone else's problem, I have the twinkle in my eye. I'm like, I'm here for it. I want to figure out what's going on. And I want to work on their problem and hopefully make their day a little bit better. I find that I'm definitely a people pleaser in that regard of like, I get happiness when I see other people get happy. And so like the relief of like I finally solved it
Uh-huh.
is like definitely like the thing that I like feel good doing.
Well, that is fantastic because I've been on the other end of that when I've been stuck on something. And we're going to go through your tips right now. But one of these I know we've done a lot. So we got your 5 tips to awesome troubleshooting. So, what is tip number 1 for us?
So the easiest one to explain is reproducibility, right? So get to the point where you can reliably cause the failure or the error or the whatever, right? If you can't reproduce it, you can't know whether or not you solved it.
Mhm.
So that's like tip number 1. There's examples here that I like to give, honestly, is like in a complicated system, it's hard to get reproducibility sometimes. So getting all of like the extra stuff out, like literally build a brand new whatever it may be, a Jenkins job, Python script, whatever. If you build the smallest version of the reproducible thing that you were trying to like fix, first of all, it wouldn't be the thing that you're actually trying to fix, so you could publish it on the internet and ask for help. And then people like me will be like, "Oh yeah, like this is why this is going on." So like that's step number 1 because then you can publish it on the internet without publishing your source code.
Mhm.
But number 2, you also have something that is controlled, hopefully, to the point where other things aren't changing state without you realizing it. So reproducibility is tip number 1.
And I've been on the other end of this too, where you have almost like a Rube Goldberg machine, if I'm pronouncing it right, where you have like the 10 different steps and you start at 1 and 10 doesn't work and you go, what is wrong? Well, exactly what you're talking about is if you can narrow it down and go, okay, things are up to 5, something breaks here. Let's just work on 5. Does that work? 6 worked out. And I've never thought about that. And this is why I asked you for this interview. That is a key for everybody. The idea that you can take the smallest part, you can make it generic code and you can put it online because you can't take your code and put it online. But if you can put a generic bit online and say, what the hell? Why doesn't this work? That is invaluable because then you can actually use the internet to help you as long as you don't have too many people write negative comments about your code. But that's another story for another day. All right, moving on. What is tip number 2?
So I would have switched them up because you hinted at this one.
Uh-huh.
So tip number 2 is local or global, right?
Okay.
So like zooming in and out of the issue. So I find this as a very interesting problem of if you have a complicated system, right? And you don't know it, you have that machine, you have like 15 steps, 10 steps, whatever, and you don't know what step caused it, you don't know what to fix. So like zooming out until you see the bigger scope of the problem, like, okay, cool, my Jenkins job failed, right? What part of my Jenkins job failed? What part of this script failed? And it might be so when I'm like helping other debugger or whenever I'm helping other developers, whenever I'm like on call and stuff like that, my zooming in and out is constant, right? It's like, okay, cool. Someone said that this thing didn't work for them on their laptop. Is it their laptop or is it anybody's laptop? Can I download their code and reproduce it? Or is it like they screwed something up on their local machine? Is it that something is screwed up on their local machine, or is it with a Python thing that they download? I work in Python a lot, so I'm using that as,
Mhm.
do they not have the right version of this pip package installed? Do they not have this? Do they not have that? Are they doing it for the first time or have they done it before? Like there's a lot of scoping that comes into this where if you zoom out far enough where it's like, oh, the internet's broken. okay, cool. I don't have to do anything. It's like, for real though. Like
Oh,
there was an alert that went off one time where Datadog just started going nuts, and it was like ding 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 ding, ding and like, oh, AWS is down. I just like went in and I was like, oh, AWS is down. Like let we don't need to worry about any of these right now. Like just turn them off. And
I can speak to that. I've had that too, where I was getting a notification for one of our RDS instances, and I'm going, "What is going on? Everything's breaking." It's like 10 o'clock. Well, they were just doing maintenance on it. It literally, I think, it was just a restart. It was like 90 seconds, but I'm looking at the logs, going, "What is going on? Everything's broken." No, it's fine.
and so like that's where the scoping comes in, right? Because if you scope all the way out to the internet's broken, you can zoom in on different parts of like, is my internet broken? Is everybody's internet broken? Is that specific RDS's internet broken? Like
Mm.
you, and then you like figure out where is the problem, right? So you're trying to pick, and that comes with experience, unfortunately, of like
Mhm.
knowing like what questions to ask to like. But I find that when people are looking hyper locally to like that one line of the log, and it says like error, and it gives you
Uh-huh.
the error, people don't look 3 lines above where it said something failed, right? And so like just zoom out a little, just try to figure out like, okay, well, what happened before? So
And I do think this is a great thing for anybody listening. The fact that if you just take even a couple seconds and you think on a bigger picture with something versus smaller, I've spent so much time doing exactly what you're talking about when I'm focusing on a little bit of code or a little interaction or a little interface and realize that it was actually something grander that was causing the problem. So 100% right on that. So let's take that into what is tip number 3?
so number 3 is asking the real problem. Uh, so this is also described as the XY problem. If people want to go look what the XY problem is, you can go look it up. There are a lot of people who have written about it before. Uh, but I find that people, software engineers, people in general are just smart, right? They try to get around their own problem. Usually, whenever they have a high sense of agency, they try to dig around themselves. They try to figure it out. But then they get to a point where they're stuck and they're like, oh, well, now I need to figure out this thing. But the real problem's up here. And then they dig a little and then they dig a little and then they dig a little. And now they're down here. And they're asking me really bizarre questions like, how do I make a regex to get like to figure out where their 9 numbers are and like strip away the first 5? And it's like, what are you doing? Like what? Like
I'm
what are you?
laughing because I've been in this exact situation. Keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, you're good. So like, what are you trying to? You're asking like a very bizarre, very specific. So like, I'm trying to write a blog post currently. XY problems are like my bread and butter. I've seen them everywhere. I'm trying to write posts about like how to solve your own XY problem, but like the the thing that you're trying to do is figure out like this is what they asked for, but what do they actually need, right? And so when someone says, oh, I need to strip away the first 5 numbers from a 9 number segment. It's like, are you trying to hide a social security number? Are you trying to hide PII? We already have that. We've solved that up here. Like, you don't need to be down here in the mud. You could just like call this API thing and it'll like strip away all the PII for you. So like, we've solved the problem up here, but then you try doing something yourself and you're way down here in the weeds. The classic example is like, uh, how do I get the last 3 letters off of a file name? And it's like, last 3 letters off of a file name. Like what could you possibly like need that for?
I would guess the
And
extension, but
yeah, so they're looking for the extension, but extensions aren't guaranteed to be 3 characters. There's operating system things that you can say, what type of file is this? And then so you just call the operating system to figure it out for you. You don't need to do it yourself.
uh,
So
on that topic, I think what happens is a lot of younger developers have that in their head where they're like, okay, well, let me figure out how to do it. And that was one problem. It took me a while from beginning to once I started getting a little more experience, I realized there's probably a utility written for it. There's probably a library written for it. Like, why am I doing something that's already been done? Let's let them who maintain this thing too. So as stuff changes, they take care of it. And then I can get onto my bits. So I could definitely see, I've probably been in this program before.
and
Uh,
so that's like again also a scoping problem. Like you need to bring yourself back up. What are you actually trying to solve? So like these are all kind of interconnected, but XY problem, figure out what the real question is.
Fantastic. All right, let's go to tip number 4.
So this one is asking for context, right? Context is key. Ask clarifying questions, repeat back to like whoever's talking to you, or like whatever you're trying to do, right? But say it with your assumptions, because part of the problem here is that humans, when we communicate, we don't realize like, oh, the other person hasn't been with me this entire time. They're not with me up here, right? My experiences and your experience is totally different. So like when I say something to like, oh yeah, like I just need to get this like Terraform applied to blah blah blah, right? And then I'm saying all that, and I'm like, but it's not working. And then but you might have context of like, oh, that's because we did this or we moved that or whatever. So there's a lot of problems that you just need to ask the clarifying questions of like, okay, what happened? What are you trying to do? Give me context around what you're doing, right? And so this is, again, they're all tied together. Like this could be XY problem, this could be scoping problem, this could be whatever. But if you ask those clarifying questions and repeat back to them what they just said to you, they might catch what you're thinking differently and like why. And so there's especially with the assumptions part. People make assumptions all the time about like this system should be doing this, but it's in actuality doing that.
Oh, I think that's an absolute 100% because I've done that as well, where I've been on both ends of it, where I know the problem and I'm stuck on this one little bit and I ask somebody a question and they have no idea what I'm talking about. Whereas if I took the time to actually give them the full context of it, and hopefully I've gotten better at that over time, then they're actually able to help me. So I think this is going to take us into what is number 5.
Yeah, so use a debugger duck, right? So you don't need, so a debugger duck, it's kind of the joke of like, oh, whenever I pair program, like, there were 5 developers and they needed to pair program. And so the 5th developer got, the rubber duck. So having something or someone that you can talk to and explain the problem out loud, right? And then you catch your own assumptions. There was in college, for my senior year of college, we had to do a blog writing session. Like we had to write a blog as part of this. It was like an open source, like kind of class, and you had to write about like what you were learning about that week. And that was actually how we got our assignments graded. And I named mine limit equals 1. Because the problem that I had was I was learning the Twitter API in Java or something. And so every time I called the program, it would take forever because it was like giving me like 50 tweets and it was taking forever. The network was taking forever to give me the 50. Mm-hmm. And so at the very top of the program, I wrote like limit equals 1. And then I made the API call where it would like limit based on the limit number. And then I came back to it like a week later, totally forgot that I did that to speed it up. Got really angry that like Twitter wasn't giving me more than 1 tweet. Started talking to someone else about it. He said, "Oh, show me your." So this is like I'm a freshman, right? And then he was a senior, and we still talk, and he still makes fun of me for this, and he still calls me limit equals 1 sometimes. So he pointed to that line because it was literally like the 3rd line. It was like right at the top, limit equals 1, and he's like, "What's that?" And I said, "Oh, and then I just deleted that line, or like I made it 50, and then like suddenly it worked. And I just like left the room, and I was like, I give up, and like I left, and like I couldn't speak to him for the rest of the day. He was laughing at the entire time that I was walking down that hallway. So like having a debugger duck that you can like talk to about, okay, well this is what's going on, and this is this, and this is that. I find myself catching myself all the time with like, oh, I said it should work this way, but reading it. It doesn't. It doesn't do that at all. It's actually doing the exact opposite of that. So the debugger duck is very important.
And I think that's one thing I try to do with a lot of my coworkers and other people is be that debugger duck who asks them questions and kind of draws that information out of them, because there's nothing more satisfying than being the person helping somebody. And all of a sudden you see their eyes stop and they go, oh, because all of a sudden you go, well, what's the problem? And then everything can like unfurl and the traffic jam stops and everybody can move forward. So perfect. I got to say, fantastic 5 tips. If people will just watch this one thing, take these 5 tips, I think their life's going to be a lot better. So now let's challenge you a little bit. You ready for our lightning round?
Yeah.
All right. I'll ask you 10 questions. You just fire through. Let's get started. Number 1, Mac, Windows, or Linux?
Mac for laptop/work, Windows for gaming desktop, and then Linux for servers.
Awesome. Favorite programming language?
Python.
Best CI/CD?
Jenkins, but only because it's the devil I know.
I think you're going to be the only person that answers that, but I like it. All right. Comments in your code, or the code is documentation?
Why not both? Add a comment if the thing you're doing is like super weird and arcane, but like you don't need to document that you're like incrementing a variable or something.
I would agree with that. I see a lot of that in the code because it'd be pointless just to document like A equals B. You go, this is A equals B. You don't need that.
Yeah.
All right. Function naming. Do you like to have that verb to start, or do you like not?
Whatever everybody else is doing in the code base. Probably verb if it's of my own.
All right. Favorite IDE?
VS Code, but it used to be PyCharm because of it still is. If I'm purely Python, it's PyCharm because of the debugger.
Okay. IDE, do you like your themes light, or do you like your themes dark?
Dark only.
Okay. All right. This is a hotly contested one. Vim or Emacs?
My joke answer is Nano, and then I see how many people get mad at
The
me.
comment section is going to be going wild on that one.
It's one of those things that like, you know what? I'm gonna piss off both people. Like I'm just gonna say Nano. No, but like I know Vim enough that like I use Vim.
Okay, perfect. All right, tough one. Microservices or monolith?
A bad microservice is a distributed monolith. And a good monolith can be distributed, like a good monolith can be deployed like a good microservice. So both can be terrible and both can be good. So choose your poison based on your infrastructure.
Very good answer. All right, last one. Spaces or tabs?
Auto format on commit so that no one ever argues.
Best answer I've heard on that one. All right, we got a couple last questions. We'll wrap it up. I asked a lot of questions, but I always like to just kind of throw this out there. Are there tips, advice, other things that I haven't asked about that the developers listening right now or other people in IT could use to like get their career going maybe a little bit better, either career-wise, cloud computing, software industry, just kind of any general helpful things you want to throw out there?
Yeah. So I learned from throwing myself into problems and projects. Even recently, I've been trying to learn Unity and just making like a cookie clicker clone. So like even doing something like that is super useful and beneficial to getting more experience, right? Just throwing yourself into a problem. I would say if you want to find a job, definitely networking. I used to be involved in around here, like Tech After 5 and like, Out in Tech and all these other like meet and greets and social hours. And a lot of them are online now. You could like join Slack communities and like just talk to people and like ask questions there. Cause then the more people you meet, the higher chances are that you can like work with them in the future or ask good questions or even like work on an open source project and potentially work somewhere that needs that open source project, right?
Fantastic. All right. You made it through everything. You've gone through all my blubbering questions. Floor is yours. Grandstand. Is there anything you want to tell the grand people of YouTube about?
Yeah. So I used to do a podcast that I'm going to try to bring back alive called Bite Size Tech. So just look up that bitesized.tech.
And I can throw that in the description too for anybody out there.
Yeah. And then honestly, with how everything's been going, like we're on Twitter as well, but like trying to figure out whether or not that's a good venue at this point. But yeah, don't really have too much. Like I'm going to write this debugging book. Maybe I'll put that up at some point, but that's like a year from now. So that's going to be awesome. Forever.
I bet we would enjoy that greatly. So I want to say thank you for taking the time to speak with us, and we appreciate all the great information.
Thank you.